In the centre of Rugby, there is a semi-abandoned house. It looks as if the previous occupants left quite suddenly. Quite a lot to tidy away. But it's the attic that holds the real secret. An enormous model railway layout covering the entire floor and 2 eaves. This was once the house of Dr. Robert Preston Hendry, a one-time army surgeon who both lived here and used it as his GP's surgery. He bought his very first O-gauge train in 1921. Dr. Hendry built the layout over a period of 66 years with the help of many other railway modelling enthusiasts. After his death in 1991 at the age of 79, his son Robert Powell Hendry lived in the house. Robert Jr. continued to organise the railway for a further 20 years, sharing his time between Rugby and the Isle of Man. Work started on the present O-gauge layout in the 1930s, but the real effort began in 1947. It became known as the Greenlane and Hillside Railway, the GHR. There are about 2,500 metres of track, sometimes on 5 different levels. The layout covers roughly 100 square metres and has a collection of 1,000 items of rolling stock. Locomotives and several of the various wagons and carriages were purchased, but the rest were all the work of the GHR team. The GHR was run by a dedicated team of 10 to 20 people, with at least 5 needing to be present at any one time to operate at its full potential. It even had its own occasional newsletter. Many of the GHR workers joined the group at an early age and have fond memories of running it over the years. The GHR runs all around the main attic, leaving very little space for operators, and even into the 2 eaves of the house. Getting into these eaves takes some effort. The layout is based on 5 main zones or groups of stations, each with its own signal boxes, train sheds, goods yards and sidings. There are also many other reconstructions such as factories, a quarry and several street scenes. Operators of the different signal boxes would normally only communicate with each other by telephone or signal bells, the aim being to replicate, as far as possible, the way in which real railways work. But in practice, a single operator often had to operate all the stations and signal boxes in his zone. There is even a clock that runs at 8 times normal speed to allow running a full day's timetable in just 3 hours. And woe betide any operator who was late with his train. Points and signals were worked either by mechanical cables or electrically. It takes some time to become familiar with the multitude of tracks and their various levels. Several tracks connect the main attic with the layouts in the 2 eaves, and narrow tunnels allow access for operators.
Well, I was born in 1947, so I was not here at the beginning of this railway. From the age of 3, I went to kindergarten on the edge of Coventry by train on my own, which sounds a bit scary these days, but wasn't as scary then. I was put in with a guard like a parson, make sure he gets out at Canley. And then from the age of 5, I travelled to school on my own by train. So I got to know railwaymen, the local railwaymen, really quite well, especially the guards. And then when I was about 8 or 9, I think, my father arranged for me to go one Saturday afternoon into the signal box, just to see what railway signalling was about. And then I went every third Sunday afternoon to the signal box, where I learned how to do railway signalling. I was still quite small, and Berkswell had some level crossing gates that were very heavy, and I had great difficulty in making the gate wheel move. I had to stand on the spokes to get the gate started. But I learned signalling, and again, that sounds a bit strange in the modern context. Station masters and management were quite happy for young men to do informal signalling. To be blunt, the railway was getting young men who were enthusiastic, training themselves in signalling, and out of that group of people, the railway would recruit signalmen. In the 60s, a group of operators came together, all pretty much of an age of myself, and as that group got together in the late 50s, early 60s, we built up a lot of operating experience and eventually tackled the weekday timetable and got very good at it.
In 1991, Robert Hendry Jr. transferred the railway to a trust, the Hillside Railway Trust, and continued to develop it for a further 20 years. In 2012, it celebrated its 85th anniversary, making it longer lived than some of Britain's mainline services. Sadly, the GHR went into decline from 2010 onwards. Loss of operators meant that the system could only be run to its full potential 2 or 3 times a year.
What I was hoping to do was to take that wagon, that 18 wagon, trade on limestone wagons out to Buchanan's Hill this way, using it, but doesn't look too promising.
The track started to deteriorate, making electrical contact with the rails difficult. But it was not possible to undertake the necessary maintenance. Robert Hendry Jr. no longer lived in the house, and in 2014 the GHR was run at full capacity for the very last time. Now, in 2016, the railway is barely capable of operation to any great extent. The tracks have become so dirty and corroded that trains cannot run smoothly. Many of the electrical connections have failed, and there are few people left who know how to manage all the complexities of the layout. What would become of one of the best O-gauge layouts in the country? New operating groups were sought, but none had the resources needed to rebuild and run such a large and complex system. At this point, a lifeline was provided by AIMREC, the Ashford International Model Railway Education Centre. David Austin takes up the story.
My name's David Austin. I'm a railway modeller of some years, and I got involved in this project because there was a whole load of correspondence coming from the members of the O-Gauge Guild saying that they really deplored the destruction of old heritage layouts. And I took it upon myself to write a letter to the O-Gauge Guild and said, well, you know, we've got the wherewithal and the skills to put something together, a little project together, so at least we can start thinking about how we can save these layouts. Now the problem, of course, is that some of these layouts are so big and complicated, having been developed by their owners over a number of years, that there's just no practical way of saving them, because you just need a huge building and a whole organisation just to try and save them and put them back into running order. But nevertheless, I took it upon myself to write this letter, which then appeared in the O-Gauge Gazette, and didn't hear much, had no response for a year or so, until one day I had a phone call from a gentleman, and he said to me, I've got a factory down in Kent and I want to use it as a possible railway museum. I've set up a trust. I said, oh right, okay, that sounds good. I want you to be a trustee. So I was humming and hawing a bit, but he came back time and time again, quite a few times, saying, I've signed up Sir William McAlpine, I've signed up Roger Daltrey, I've signed up Jules Holland and Pete Waterman. And all these musical celebrities were really very keen model railway enthusiasts. We started off the trust about a year ago, and my first task in this was to work out a business plan to save heritage model railways like this Henry layout.
It's now time to dismantle the Greenlane and Hillside Railway in preparation for the move to its new home in Kent. All the rolling stock is being carefully labelled and packed away. Next, the really challenging task of dismantling the layout. It will be broken up into sections with the aim of reconstructing everything as much as possible as it was whilst in Rugby. In a few years, it should be running again in Ashford.